We don't have much time, gentlemen, so let's get straight to it. There are close to 11,500 registered sports enterprises just in Shanghai, a growth of nearly 13%. So there's a lot of competition. How do you guys, as obviously larger properties, but comparatively newer to the Chinese market, and of course, Richard in particular, you've been here a while, but going back at that history, still newer to China, how do you try to create that foothold in the China market? Victor, I'll start with you.
Well, I think that's a challenge that every single sport organization has. I don't think the competition isn't really the worry. I mean, if there's more people and there's more business, we couldn't create the entire sport ecosystem ourselves, right? So the more people that are in there, the better. I think the challenge really is your ability to localize and innovate faster than everybody else and make sure that your property is the property that attracts fans, attracts the sponsors, and attracts the things. And gaining a foothold in China really is a big part of why you have to have a business that's based here, and why we're here and not trying to run one championship out of our headquarters in Singapore or NFL out of the States. You got to be here in this market.
Richard, have you found that these challenges are unique to the NFL in China, or these are countrywide challenges, the things that that you deal with on a regular basis?
Yeah, after dealing with lots of different sports and leagues over the years, they're products, and you have to look at them like products. And it's the key to it is a big part of it is distribution. And the thing that's changed in China, that's made the biggest change here, is the opening up of the media market, and primarily through online streaming. And so previously there was kind of a series of cascading monopolies that started off with CCTV at the top, and then you had each province and municipality would have their own television station, and it was linear, and it was one tube, and you could only get one product or one program down that tube at one time. And now you have a non-linear, privatized to a majority degree industry that is competitive. And media drives sports. Media is our distribution network. So it's the same for any product. You've got, if you're Budweiser, you rely on distribution. And you have to have that kind of competition. And that's what drives the change. So here in China, that was a very unique situation. It is now opened up and become more like the rest of the world, as I'm sure the business of exporting coffee cups has become more standardized out in China as well. But you get an equalization of the business landscape here in China a little bit more slowly. As everybody knows, it's a unique market. There are still many unique things, but it is starting to move fairly slowly towards a competitive business-like market. Because previously, it was, along with other aspects of the business landscape, it was one of the most government regulated, and so that held it back. The whole idea of sport was more of a propaganda tool rather than a business, a natural, organically occurring.
Now, I was at another AmCham event about 4 years ago or so, I believe, when you were talking about this same point, but saying that the CCTV monopoly at some point was going to be broken down. And a lot of people in the room at the time were pretty skeptical. They think, no, you've got to be on CCTV. If you're not, you're nowhere. The landscape has dramatically changed. We've obviously seen a lot of input from the online platforms. Tencent have a huge deal, hundreds of millions of dollars with the NBA here in China. But it's been pretty volatile. Do you think it's sort of settled down with some of these platforms, Le Sports in particular, big boom and bust really? Do you think we're beginning to see a more mature market, or are we still early stage here?
Do you want me to? You get some ups and downs, but Mark, on a big scale, it's going up. It's always going up. And it will go up, and the next NBA deal will be eye-popping. Our business is fans times engagement. Engagement is how much money that you can draw out of them. I recently purchased a pay-per-view event for 18 renminbi, I think, here. and in the US it was 60. That'll change. Just like the business, just like the media landscape will change. Then you have fans, of which for the NBA, there's 3 to 4 times the number of fans watching the playoffs in China than in the US. But they're paying less. It's harder to draw that money out of each one of those fans. But when they do, ESPN plays $1.3 billion for 1 year, about 20% of the games that are on Tencent. $1 billion deals are coming very quickly, and it's going up. The whole industry is always going up. I mean, it's a new, rapidly changing industry that kind of, at some point, I'm sure, will start to level off. But if you just think about it, most people in this room, your parents at one time made more money than the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, in 1971, Roger Staubach made $25,000. That's changed. Everybody talks about tech and all that kind of stuff. But sports, as far as a changing market.
Victor, in terms of the entire pie of everything that you focus on in your role as the CEO, obviously you've got event production, which is a huge part as well. How big is media, and how much time can you spend on those deals trying to expand that broadcast network versus everything else that you need to do?
I think to really understand the context of that, you have to look at where One Championship started. It's very similar to what Philip was talking about. I mean, my company is only 7 years old. How old is the NFL?
It's about 16.
Yeah, all right. So when I started my company, I had 1 event a year, and today I have 30 events a year. We got 350 staff. Our office is still headquarters is in Singapore, offices in Bangalore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and here. So definitely the world is growing in terms of what we're doing. But the key thing, the mantra that I preach in our organization, because my background is sports media, is exactly what Rich was talking about, is reach, frequency, and engagement. I think 15, 20 years ago, you could create a sport property that was really just about events and being event-based, monetizing it on that, broadcasting it, sponsorship, ticket sales, etc. But today, the fantastic multi-billion-dollar organizations have achieved this ability of reach, frequency, and engagement continuously, which is exactly what esports is doing, if you think about it. Reaching their audience every day with high frequency and extreme engagement. And the sports that are able to adapt to that are able to monetize it every day to Sunday. So if you look at One Championship, we've got 30 events a year. We're basically on television in our key markets every single day of the year. In the Philippines, which is traditionally an NBA stranglehold, our TV ratings for our live show are 200 to 250% better than the NBA because we're just more frequent with local athletes and more content.
Now, the more mature leagues have that set schedule. You have that winter season, Richard, but you have 30 events now. What's the magic number? What are you trying to get to? Are you trying to increase that frequency?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to 104.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll, and I'm fairly confident we'll hit it. In the early part of our organization, holding the event was the challenge. But that wheelhouse now is turnkey for us and executional. So we're actually pulling back on our number of events just because we're waiting for other parts of our organization to catch up. Today, again, I mean, in 7 years, when I first started, I was producing 1 video a day for our original content. Today, I produce 60 original videos a day for multiple platforms and multiple languages right across the region. So I need that to ramp up to 300 to keep pace with everything else that we're doing.
So 104, presumably 2 a week, no holidays?
Yeah, and around the world, I mean, we could easily hold 30 events just in China alone, right? And we haven't hit India yet. We haven't gone into Europe or North America. And so once those markets, kind of those continents sort of kick in, they're sort of standalone. I think in the major cities in Asia, we're pretty maxed out already. We're 4 in the Philippines, 4 in Malaysia, 4 in Indonesia, 2 in Singapore. So I don't think we're going to grow those ones anymore. But India, by next year, if we get our stuff together, we'll do 20 events there alone.
Now, both NFL and One Championship come from strong financial positions. Richard, of course, you have huge TV deals back in the States. Victor, you've had a lot of fundraising in this part of the world in recent months and years, but you can't just spend. I mean, you'd like to, but you've got to get it back, of course. Richard, for you, what are the financial constraints of the NFL China budget?
I'm sure we have some. I haven't seen them. I mean, in all honesty, we're a very careful organization. We evaluate each opportunity on its merits and on its return of investment on that project. So if it's a good project, the resources of the NFL will get behind it. There definitely is, I think, on headcount. It's an interesting organization that way. No, it's not something where you only can spend this much no matter what happens. We put forward projects, and we kind of have a Hunger Games type trial for it, and if it survives and it looks like it's going to give a good ROI, then you look forward.
Do you get a lot of pressure from the owners to say, right, when can we start, realizing the potential of the Chinese market?
Yeah,
instead
absolutely.
of just, a grassroots initiative, which I'm sure they're happy with, but when are they going to start seeing some dollars?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest things is that we've been lucky in our home market to continue to grow, regardless of the circumstances there. But when you can invest $10 into North Texas and get $20 back every year, you tend not to look outside your borders as much, and that's been one of our failings. And we're starting to do so now, very aggressively. And it's I think it's called American football because we've not been very good at promoting it outside of America. In all honesty, it's unfortunate that way, but it's definitely coming, and it's realization that it's a great product. When you invest your free time, you get a consistent and high quality return on that investment. And that's, if you see what's happened in London, you see what's happened, unfortunately not this next Monday in Mexico, but there's not a cultural difference here on a product. People start, again, to lose their minds a little bit with sports, which happens regularly. But it's all, and I believe it was Philip that said, we're all competing against other forms of entertainment. And when you look at this domestically, you just look at a couple of things like CSL and you say, oh, why aren't more people coming to the games? And I was talking with them recently, and when you're in a 50-year-old stadium, what was the last shopping mall you went to that was 50 years old? What was the last movie theater you went to that was 50 years old? That's what you're competing against. And you go, you want to have a good time, you want to be entertained. Yes, the sport can be high quality, but you're narrowing down your funnel of people that you're attracting. So either you live with that or you better your experience. So that's...
Victor, obviously it's a very different picture for you, just 7 years old, as you said, as a company. You've got a lot of investors presumably talking to you and giving you a lot of friendly advice. What kind of pressures do you have from them to how do you find that balance between expansion and sort of prudent financial management?
I think there's two things that I'm very fortunate for. If this was when I started the company 7 years ago, the pressure would be significantly different, I think, because you have to remember back then at that time, nobody was even talking about martial arts. When I left ESPN, Star Sports, literally every single person that I spoke to said, why would you leave that company to go start one championship? It didn't make any sense. So I think the pressure would have been different there. Today, when my new investors, Sequoia, have come on board, GIC, Green Oaks, we're at a different stage of our development. But very lucky in that we're homegrown and based in Asia, and all my board members are all from Asia and live here. So I don't really have I don't deal with even little things that are irritating when you get to that board level, like time zone and scheduling meetings and coordinating that kind of stuff. I don't have any of those day-to-day logistical issues, and the board is very understanding of our challenges. So we do our board meetings not only in Singapore, but we can do them in Manila, or we could do it here in Shanghai, and that really helps everybody understand the challenges of each market. So I'd say I spend almost no time to my board trying to explain how unique China is or the challenges of it. That's a given. Everybody understands it. It's where is our solutions of how to own the markets that we are in.
That's why he still has hair.
If you look at many different industries, China develops at light speed, but I think a lot of people in the sports industry would say it's not developing quickly enough. Just more generally, stepping back perhaps from your sports, you've got the NBA, which obviously has monetized very well in China. Where are we at the stage of development in the industry more generally in terms of realizing that potential and monetization? Are we still early on? When can, ticket prices for a lot of sporting events are still pretty down compared with what they would be overseas, sporting rights as well for broadcast. But in a lot of other areas, China is catching up with the rest of the world and overtaking. So what's that trajectory and where are we at the moment?
Well, I think in general in the world of sports, Shanghai is the place to be. I mean, there's just so much going on. But to your second part about ticketing, the ticketing problem for sports isn't a particular sport problem or China's problem. Every sport in Asia has problems with tickets. Unless you are a Jay Chou concert that you're selling out like this, or actually one of Philip's events that are selling out like this, everyone else, the rest of sports of anything from Asian games to football to has ticketing challenges, right? And I think that touches on what Richard is talking about, the stadium, the experience, and all those kind of things. But really, it's just going to take a little bit of time before our fan base realize that this is something that they need to put on their calendar and spend money on.
Rachel, what's your take?
Yeah, I always go back to structure. And if you look at what role did sports play, being a Chinese history major as well, what role did sports play for China? It was a propaganda tool. It was primarily you take young athletes, bring them out, put them in a stream, you build them up, and they win for the glory of China. That creates an atrophy or anemic professional bodies because it's not an organic growth model. You look at what one event, if you've been to them, is amazingly consumer oriented. It's those League of Legends events. And it's primarily because they're not tied down by the Xiaochoubu or some organization that oversees them that is interested not necessarily in the consumer success. You need to. What does China do well? China does business well, very well. Let sport be a business. Let it be a business 100%, and it will do just fine. In fact, that whole $4 trillion renminbi mark that most people scoff at, it will be attained as long as you let it go. Let it be competitive and built out. Tickets, it's a problem. Not for League of Legends, because you get what you're paying for. If you go there and all you get is a bottle of water and a little tin of crisps for your merchandise, for your concessions, and then you sit in a plastic seat that hasn't been wiped out, guy next to you is smoking and shouting things you wouldn't want your kid to hear, why would you pay a lot for that? That's the thing. You've got to give. It's a business. Don't say, well, we've got this great striker. Yeah, but okay, well, I'll watch him on TV.
Well, the good news is, I think the entertainment value is still slightly higher in Shanghai than it is in Beijing, so it's good for these guys.
I'm staying out of that one. It's your funeral there, Mark.
In terms of concessions and so on. Anyway, let's talk about another topic. How important is it in your sports, in sports in generally, to produce a Chinese star? Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be homegrown, developed by China, but someone that the fans can really embrace. Stephen Marbury is, of course, not Chinese, but they love him up in Beijing and elsewhere. Jeremy Lin, he grew up in the States. He's a huge star here. Let's talk about that.
You want to start?
I'll be pretty short. Yeah, no, people have been talking about the Yao Fling for a long time. You need your athlete. You do. It helps. It's a catalyst to be much bigger. But Yao Ming was on the cover of ESPN magazine before he ever played in the NBA. That's how popular basketball was here. I can remember when I was a student, there was basketball courts right inside of the Tiananmen Square. Yeah, and it definitely helps, but you've got to look at each product is different. 2/3 of our players don't touch the ball, and they're covered with a helmet and a face mask. And if you can visually identify your offensive line for your favorite team, you're probably too big of a fan, you know. So it's one of those things. It's just different. It's not like that. So.
Yeah, I think finding the next hero is key for any sport. You know, everyone talks about the Yao Ming effect. For us, particularly because we're martial arts, and martial arts is a sport that we don't really have to educate any of our fans on. They get it, whether it's Taekwondo, Muay Thai, Kung Fu, or mixed martial arts. And we have seen in other countries the powerful effect of when we have a world champion from that country. A really easy example for us is in Myanmar, which is, you know, a country where average GDP is, I mean, I don't know, $5 or something like that, and we hold our event there. It's at a 20,000-seater stadium that's 40 years old, is not air conditioned. It's like 45 degrees in there, and it's like unbelievably uncomfortable and a horrible, horrible experience. But we sell out that stadium because we have a world champion from there, and he's literally one of the most popular figures in that country today. Like, he's mobbed everywhere he goes. And so I do see that positive impact. But for me, it's the business of sports is much more personal, not just the business side of having an icon that drives commercial side of it. It's really about the kind of heroes that you want to build for your children. My kids would never have the opportunity to grow up with sporting heroes that are Asian and born and bred in Asia. And I look forward to playing a role that's contributing to that, because I think that's important. Where, you know, typically if you grew up in an Asian household, like, sports as a career, as something to do, is not really an option. You know, you tell your dad, "Oh, I'd like to be a football player, American football player," and he'll just, you know, my dad would slap me, right? He'd be like, "No, you're going to university." So I think being having an opportunity to build these heroes in Asia. We have a Chinese female world champion with Xiong Jingnan, and she's at the early stages of development of her career, but we're seeing with her the kind of following that she can build, and as a role model to other people in sports and in life.
I did want to just leave a few minutes for questions. I'm sure we have some for these two distinguished gentlemen alongside me. So, someone getting the mic? Yes.
Hello, I'm Thomas. I work for Sodexo here in China. A question for Richard. From the NFL, we run the Michigan University Stadium, which is fine engagement. People come, you know, hours. Just if you don't know the stadium, world largest, 114 seats. People come 5 hours, 6 hours to the venue. We just talk about hospitality, talk about fine engagement. How long does it take to bring Chinese to a stadium? Today they come 1 hour before and left 10 minutes after the game. How long are they going to spend? How can we increase the time spent at the stadium? What's your point of view on that?
Yeah, I think some of it is to do with the sport. I was lucky enough to see Tottenham Man City, and the day after we had a game in London at Wembley, both at Wembley. And yes, you know, the arrival pattern is very, very different. For our game, they're there 3 hours ahead of time. There for the Premier League match, they come, they go, halftime, they drink, and then they leave. But the answer to that goes back to my previous. I mean, what are the two most popular stadiums in China right now? It would be the Mercedes-Benz and the Wukason. What are they? They're private. There's very few, and I can't even think of one, private outdoor stadium. You get a well-managed private outdoor stadium, it'll do well. It will do well. You know, if you have dining options, and there's no reason why you wouldn't have an AT&T Dallas Cowboys type stadium where you can have white tablecloth, fine dining, an hour, 2 hours before the game. But that's the present operators of the stadiums, the outdoor stadiums, are not incentivized to do that.
Do you have time for another one? Yeah.
if I'm allowed to ask. This is a little bit more of a just what's next, and you don't have to go into it too much, but a little bit of news lately for one championship with Eddie Alvarez and Demetrius Johnson joining. You know, is the next phase maybe a little bit more of some of these international stars, not just Asia born and bred? So I'd like to hear your comment on that, Victor. And then Richard, just what's next? Do you have anything to talk about for the audience as far as your next phase of development? Obviously, media has been very important, some grassroots. Anything bigger in play that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is we have a problem of too many international athletes want to come to us now, whether it's in multiple sports. We've changed the format of a typical night. So out of 14 matches in a night, 14 bouts, you'll get a chunk that are Muay Thai, some that are kickboxing. We even held a boxing world championship, and then some of those MMA. So we're right across the board, and that's attracting athletes from multiple disciplines of martial arts from around the world, including in mixed martial arts. I think that's one big direction. We also, at that same time, announced another $50 million that we're going to put into the launching of an esport league tied with one championship with a couple of telcos and Dentsu that we partnered with as well.
Next, in general, and we hope to be part of it, I think, is the next big boom in China sports is domestic sports. You look at what Michael and Joe Si are doing. You know, the tennis, the Formula One. I'm excited for what they're going to be doing at the Baoan. You know, that's going to be the first group that's really going to be able to take that, and then their new stadium for SIPG. You're going to see that privatization of stadiums, and I think you're seeing professionalization of what Yao Ming's doing at CBA, what Alex is doing at CSL. You're going to start to see a higher level of professional domestic leagues. And hopefully something with the American football sport as well.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.